What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Check the Kick. Sherdog.com is a website. I am the host, Devin, and we are back off of a week of, we will say the fights were not muy caliente. UFC Mexico, UFC Mexico City. But we had some pretty good fights. We're going to talk about a few of them, and then we're going to talk about the GFL. They actually announced dates and fight cards. Still don't know if that shit's going to happen. And then we're going to take a quick look into this weekend's fights at the Apex. That's headlined by Josh Emmett taking on Lerone Murphy. First segment of the show, Out with the Old. We're going to just finish up and cover the rest of UFC Mexico. We had Brandon the Assassin Baby Moreno defeating Steve Erceg 49-46 on all three judges' scorecards in a close fight with a clear winner, in my opinion. But if you just watched the fight, you didn't have to submit a scorecard, and you just like watched this fight happen in a gym. If these dudes were just doing 5 rounds of like super hard sparring in a gym, you'd be like, shit, Brandon Moreno got the better of that probably, but like Erceg fought his ass off and fought really well. Brandon Moreno finally got a win in Mexico City. He's like 0-3 there or some shit, like 2 losses and a draw, and he finally pulled out a dub. This is kind of a short notice fight for both these dudes. Before we talk about the X's and O's of the fight, I just want to talk about Steve Erceg and how somebody commented somewhere, it might have been on Ben and Keith's show, maybe on the live show last weekend. I was in there tuning in, and I think someone's along the line said something like Steve Erceg is like highly favored, or he's being, but I kind of like feel the opposite of that. I don't think this is like super favorable matchmaking for him, or this is almost toward of like career mishandling, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, he knocked out Matt Schnell, and then he got a title fight with Pants, and a lot of people said it was undeserving. That was also kind of put together on short notice. The UFC needed a title fight. Pants has beaten everyone in this division, if not once, twice. So they needed a fight. He needed a fighter, and Steve Erceg was that guy. He was ranked in the division. He knocked out Matt Schnell, but he's been in the UFC for 2 years, and this dude has fought for the title, fought Kai Kara-France, and fought Brandon Moreno and lost all 3 of those fights. And outside of the KKF fight where he did get knocked dead, I don't think that would even happen in a rematch. He literally just kind of got caught slipping, but he did get caught slipping like that in the first round of this fight as well. Loop back to Erceg. And he had a close fight and still could have arguably beat Pants. And I mean, you could figure out a way to probably score this fight for Erceg, but I think you'd be wrong. But I wouldn't burn you at the stake if you did. So clearly he's good, and he's not just good. Clearly he's very good. Like, you can go through the rest of the division and then he beat a lot of those guys. But man, this he needs a major step back in opponents. Like, KKF is probably the hardest puncher in the division. If it's not him, it's Manuel Kopp, and Manuel Kopp might be the hardest striker, but KKF is a better put together boxer alone than Manuel Kopp, and he's probably just with his hands more dangerous than Manuel Kopp. And yeah, he's gonna do that to dudes. Like, he freaking cracks. He just needs such a step back. Like, he's still young. He's like 29. He's only been in the UFC for like 2 years at this point. He'll probably fight for a title again, and he'll actually go on like a 4 or 5 fight win streak and probably deserve it when he does. And Steve Erceg is not bad, but he needs a major step back because he's so good that I think that there's still an opportunity to rebuild him. This is a really dope fight. Moreno's boxing, both of them, their boxing alone just looked incredible. There's just a really high level striking match. Like, watching it was like one of the more high level main events just of the year. Like, these 2 dudes are very good at fighting, especially way up at elevation at 7,000 plus feet in Mexico City. Brandon Moreno's defense kind of got better through the fight, but his offense kind of dwindled. But that's just like, these dudes are fighting at like over 7,000 feet at elevation in Mexico City. Moreno, I really liked his in the first round. He like was ripping to the body, kicking to the body. I really like his like weird step out angle body kick that he throws, where like Usyk will try to cut an angle and like run out of the pocket. And a lot of times he'll do that, you know, patented Stipe Miocic, like kind of cut an angle off the back foot, pause, and then boom, fire straight down the pike. You know, how he knocked out Verdum, and he kind of cracked John Jones with one of those two in his most recent fight, in his last fight, thankfully. But Usyk likes to pull off that slick back foot counter punching where he'll kind of cut an angle, plant, and throw. But what Moreno was doing is clearly they did the tape study, and he kind of had a counter for that, where he was going to chase him out of the pocket. But instead of chase him in a way where he'd put himself in a bad place to get stung, he kind of would cut off Usyk and chase him out of the pocket and finish combinations to the leg or to the body with that kick that he throws. And he kind of, the way he sets up his big left hook, he also kind of sets up the body kick in a similar way too, which is, it's pretty nice. Moreno's right hand looked better than it's ever looked before, because he's kind of a one-handed boxer. Like, he's got a really good jab and a really good check hook. And he can like cover distance and throw it fast, and he'll, you know, throw it at a variety of speeds. But his right hand looked good. He was throwing that Swiss stance combo, kind of the way that Dustin Poirier likes to throw it. And that's kind of how KKF caught Steve Usyk, and he was rocked Steve Usyk real bad in the first round. Usyk never drops. Usyk is such a tight, crispy boxer. He's even the cleaner, like, if you just told both of these dudes, like, yo, just do like 10 minutes on the heavy bag, like Usyk on a heavy bag probably looks awesome. They're both just like shelled up in front of each other and kind of throwing combinations at each other. I would like to see someone like Steve Usyk, like, you know, do some like guard manipulation, like throw a light jab and then pull the lead hand down and rip something behind it. If he's going to stay shelled up in front of somebody, his corner said, you know, he's firing off your jab. He's you know, he's moving his head off the center line, and he's countering your jab. So why don't you just throw a kick up the middle, throw a teeps? That was really cool by Steve Usyk. And between the fourth and fifth round, his corner told him, hey, whatever I tell you, you're going to do the opposite of that, because I think he's listening to us. Brandon Moreno is listening to us. I just think Brandon Moreno is that good and probably that well schooled. I don't think Brandon Moreno was listening to Steve Usyk's corner between the fourth and the fifth round and taking that information at 7,000 plus feet elevation in Mexico City, in his hometown, while everybody's going fucking nuts. I don't think Brandon Moreno could probably not even hear his own corner, let alone Steve Usyk's corner. Plus, you know, English isn't Moreno's first language, with the heavy Australian accent. You know, Usyk's a dude from Perth. I don't like, when they both speak English to each other, I don't know if either one of them are picking up this, you know, picking up the message 100%, especially in under those circumstances, in those conditions. But whatever. This was just a real good fight. I didn't like it was really close on the feet, but there was one moment where Moreno kind of like feinted a low single leg. He picked up the low single leg and then immediately threw a right hand behind it and landed on Usyk. And I was like, man, like, yeah, that was nifty and cool, but like, you absolutely nailed that takedown entry. And then was it in the third round, he got a takedown, and then in the fifth round, he ended up like on top of Usyk, like in a scramble, and like clearly he showed in the tiny little bit of grappling and wrestling that we saw, he seemed to be the more proficient dude, like on the mat. And I think he should have like gone for that more, because that would have opened up his hands a little bit more. Like, he played Steve Usyk's game and beat Steve Usyk at his game. And like, not even Pantoja could do that. I hate to say it, but like, Pantoja had to, when Pantoja fought Usyk, it was a Pantoja fight. And when these dudes just fought, like, this is the fight that Steve Usyk wants to have with dudes. He wants to have a tit for tat, like right in the pocket boxing match. And Moreno was able to meet him there and have that fight with him and win. So very impressive, very cool. Sorry, I had to pause my recording because I just had a coughing fit. Hopefully I'm not sick. I mean, I did like Usyk's counter punching. He looked good. He looked really good in the pocket. His jab looked really good. His kicks were also really nice. His body work in round two, the round he won, the round he clearly won. He put in work on Moreno, and he could kind of shout out to him for kind of clearly losing the first round, getting stung up a little bit, and then like making a read, staying composed, and going out there and like punishing Moreno to the body. Urseg's problem in this fight, excuse me, coughing on camera, it's really professional. Urseg's problem in this fight was the adjustment he made only allowed him to compete better with Moreno, but it wasn't enough to like win. He would have needed to make an adjustment like to help him win this fight. He made his offensive adjustments, and his defense, held up through the rest of the fight, through the second to the fourth. But Moreno was just like a little more active. He had the bigger moments. Steve may hit him with a double jab cross combo, and then Moreno is blasting him with a big leaping hook. Like, it's just going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Brandon Moreno, then going into this fight, I picked Brandon Moreno because I literally said this isn't anything you can do, I can do better fight. And that's exactly what happened. Like, Moreno was just the better striker and the better grappler in the tiny little bits of grappling that they showed. Poor Steve Urseg ends up in a shitty position at the end of the fifth round. I really like Brandon Moreno. Like, he's one of my dudes. I love the assassin baby. I love watching him fight. I love his style. I love his swagger. Motherfucker was just swagging through this whole fucking fight. Like, yeah, whatever. Like this, people talk about like Nate Diaz, like looking cool in the fight. Like, no, Brandon Moreno swagged his way through that fucking fight. Like, it was almost to the point where I'm like, dude, like you could be doing more here to win this fight, but he still won. 49-46 clearly too. He should just like, he holds the ticket of being like a former Mexican UFC champion. He's probably the biggest star in that division. I mean, he like, I would say him and Pants are definitely probably the biggest stars in that division. Now that Figgy's gone, now that Henry Cejudo's gone, there's some things that he can do. Now, if he just like wants to chase a bag of money, he could say, I'll fucking fight Henry Cejudo in a 5-round co-main event on some random pay-per-view card, like maybe the Magomed Ankalaev Alex Pereira rematch. Like, he could lock that up. Cejudo would take that fight. It's a big fight for both those dudes. The fight means fucking nothing. Means absolutely nothing for the reasons of like Henry's old and Moreno would be moving up a division. So like, if Henry beats Moreno, well, Moreno's only a 125er, and then Moreno beats Henry. Well, Henry's old, so just the fight doesn't do shit for either one of those guys unless there's a bunch of money involved. He could fight Manuel Kopp in a number one contender fight, which if I was a dude in the flyweight division, I would not be fighting Manuel Kopp in a number one contender fight unless I was fighting up in the rankings, and that's just not the case for Brandon Moreno. He'd be fighting backward in the rankings. And he'd have to be fighting number one. Manuel Kopp's a risk. And he's not just a risk because he's dangerous in fight. I don't think Manuel Kopp would beat Brandon Moreno, like especially if Brandon Moreno would just like, did all the right things. But I wouldn't sign to fight Manuel Kopp because he's just shady. And he's had issues making weight and all that stuff. And if I was Brandon Moreno, I would not waste a training camp on Manuel Kopp, especially to fight back in the rankings. What I would be doing is blowing up Hunter and Dana's phone saying, I'm the biggest star in the division. You guys are going to, Guadalajara for UFC Noche this year. So they're going to do it on Mexican soil. I want the co-main event. I want the main event. Give me fucking pants. Like, that's the fight I want. And then Ursig should just fight Asu Almabayev. Like, that was the fight that was supposed to happen. He'll clap that dude up. Like, we just watched Manuel Kopp crush Asu Almabayev. And I am so confident that Ursig would do it probably the same way, and it might even look cooler because his boxing is so tidy and crispy. Really good fight from Steve Ursig. He should not feel down on himself, but he just needs a career rebuild. And it's not a career rebuild because things are going wrong. It's a career rebuild because things are kind of going wrong, but he's good, and he can totally get back to this picture, be back in the title picture. Moving on to the co-main event, we had Manuel Torres taking on Drew the Chin Dober. No, he's not the Chin anymore. Manuel Torres crushed Drew Dober, and it like wasn't even close. He like hit him with a 1-2 combo, killed him, turned Drew Dober into a wrestler. That's how you know it's bad, unless he's fighting Moicano for some weird reason. Drew Dober shoots on a low single out of just pure desperation, survival instinct. Like this wasn't no beautiful snatch single. Like this was, yeah. And then it's really sad to watch an old dude like get hurt, and then their MMA instincts like is to shoot for something low because they're just like headed towards the ground anyway, and then they just kind of like end up like a partially cooked pancake because they're getting hammer fisted to the back of the head and behind the ear, and then they just like slowly die. How many legends have we seen? Like, oh, they get hurt, shoot a low single, and then they just get fucking bomb hammer fisted to shit. That's what Drew Dober did. And when I say like an old guy is because I think Drew Dober is finally an old guy. I hate to say that, but I really do think he's finally an old dude. I think the goose is cooked. I think we're here, boys. Think this is it. I think Drew Dober is finally old, and I feel really, really bad. He went from, being made out of vibranium to paper mache. Like, it's all, you can sculpt a paper mache to look like a Greek goddess, but what happens when you go and touch it or pour some water on it? It falls apart. And I think Drew Dober's kind of finally at the point where he's, go look through his career. Go look at all the dudes he's fought and go watch the tape, like the Terrence McKinney fight. Yeah, he finished Terrence McKinney. He almost died in that fight. Bobby Green fight. He was getting pieced up by Bobby Green. And you just keep going like the Moicano fight. That was a war. And these are like only recent fights. Freaking Matt Favola killed him. I mean, Rafael Alves, that was a crazy fight. And that was right after the Terrence McKinney fight. Brad Riddell fight was a war. Like, he's fought so many dudes. Like, he's fought OAM in 2016, it's just he needs a major step back. But like, he's going to be fighting some dude off the Contender Series next, and they're probably going to put him up against some puncher. I don't think he'll get his walking papers because he's Drew Dober, but this is like his worst. Yeah, the Islam Mahasha fight was real bad, but that's like a submission. Yeah, this is real comparable to that Matt Favola fight to me. We're like, that one was bad. Gene Silva on short notice up a division. He hung tough. He took a lot of big shots and was hurt and almost finished multiple times in that fight. But it was like a TKO doctor stoppage because his eyebrow like blew up. But no, this is bad, man. At his age too, what is he, 36? Let me see. Yeah, he's 36. Like, at lightweight. He's coming off of 3 consecutive losses. 2 of them are finishes. You just got to feel for the dude because he's such an action fighter. One of the better punchers in the division, but he's just, he's never been a guy with incredible head movement. He's a smaller, stocky guy for the division. He's a guy that will bop in and out of the pocket to land his shots. And like, dudes are just getting better. He's getting slower. People are, taller and bigger than ever in this division. They've got really good timing. They can, he leaps into the pocket. Let me just snipe him with a 1-2 and then fucking hit him with 15 unanswered punches. And then, Beltron is okay to just let a dude die. That's crazy. Poor Sanko's like, make it stop. Sanko had a really good night too. She's awesome. But yeah, boys, this one was bad. What's next for Drew Dober? A super fucking layup. Like, too bad he's already fought Ricky Glenn. That's what he needs to do, is just fight like a layup fight. If the UFC cares, or they're gonna just like put him against some like highly touted puncher prospect off the Contender Series. Manuel Torres should fight like Firas Azim. That seems cool. That wraps up the first segment of the show. Out with the old, We actually have a topic for the middle segment of the show this week. I know I've been lacking on that. Middle of the show, what's hot? We are going to talk about it's hot, but it's like a hot pocket or like a hot roller from a gas station. Or like hot ass. I'm just kidding. GFL. The GFL has announced 2 dates, and they are both at the Los Angeles Shrine Auditorium. I have never heard of that. I'm if you guys know me personally, I grew up in South Florida, just outside of Miami. I lived there for quite some time, but I moved to the Pacific Northwest region of the country. I live in Washington State now, and I'm pretty, pretty far from the LA Shrine Auditorium, but I'm definitely closer than I was when I was living in Florida. And I don't know anything about it, never heard of it. I've never been to LA. Actually, don't really want to go. But the GFL has announced 2 dates there. I'm going to talk about these fights on these cards. They've got some big names. People are on Twitter acting like they care about it. I don't know if they really do. The names are not so terrible. And judging by some of these names, they're also not drug testing, which is going to be great because this is a fucking flash in the pan. Like, this is not going to last. So why get any sort of USADA, WADA, any sort of, who cares? Like, Eddie Hall is not fighting on here. We're talking about like Uriah Faber. All right. So here are the 2 dates. The 2 dates are May 24th. That's a Saturday. And then the other date is May 25th, a Sunday. So they got 2 back-to-back fight cards coming up. I'm pretty sure the Sunday one will probably be like a daytime card. They don't have the fight. And I'm assuming the Saturday might be a daytime. I don't know if they're going to want to compete with the UFC. I don't know where they're going to broadcast this. I'm going to assume that it's going to be like free on YouTube, but who knows? Really, who knows? Okay, so rundown of the card really quickly. The Saturday May 25th card at the Shrine Auditorium. There's going to be a women's bantamweight fight. Alexa Connors, I'm not too familiar with her, and she'll be fighting Kat Zingano. Very familiar with her. Marlon Moraes is back again. He's fighting Ray Borg. Those are both at bantamweight. Another fight at bantamweight. I don't know why this fight is at bantamweight. This should just be at women's featherweight because it's the fucking GFL. Holly Holm is fighting Julia Budd. So for whatever reason, they're making these 2 40-year-old women cut to 135 for the only fight they're going to ever have in this organization. Whatever. We're going to get Anthony Pettis versus Benson Henderson 4, I believe. At men's featherweight, again, why are they making these dudes cut to 145? There's no reason. Oh, I just realized. The GFL whole entire thing is all of their weight classes are 10 pounds heavier. So their bantamweight's 145. Their lightweight's okay. I feel way better about everything now because I was going to say Chad Mendes is not making 145. That dude is like openly on steroids. And he's fighting Mauki Linares. I don't know anything about Mikey Linares, but I do know about Chad Mendes. And then it'll be headlined by Uriah Faber taking on Renan Barao. Super old dudes, super old ladies, but it should be kind of fun. Like if it doesn't just fucking fall to pieces. The Sunday fight is a little more sad and a lot worse, probably. Luis Giesman is taking on Abu Nurmagomedov. Paige Van Zandt is back to MMA and she's fighting Randy Field. Alan Belcher is fighting Stuart Austin. That's at heavyweight. Alexander Gustafsson is fighting OSP. Yeah. Let's take it back to 2012. Here's a great one. Alimale McFarlane is taking on Viviane Pereira. Unfortunately, it's not Alex Pereira's sister. The co-main event is going to be Uriah Hall taking on Douglas Lima at middleweight. That could be okay. Douglas Lima like fell off an absolute cliff when he moved up the division, and then like I don't know, like stopped throwing punches. And then this is headlined by the Sadness fight. Boys, this may be his 10th loss in a row. El Kukui, Tony Ferguson has taken on Dylan Dennis. Probably the best troll in MMA currently, or combat sports, just period, whatever the hell you consider him. Yeah, so those should be sad and interesting. There's some fights on there that I'm okay. Like, I'm down to watch Chad Mendez get into a scrap. He's been murking dudes in BKFC, and he's on all the steroids in the world. Holly Holm versus Julia Budd should be a bad fight. But like promotionally and like athletic commission wise, it's totally acceptable. But like letting Marlon Moraes fight again, like that's just almost not acceptable for me. Like the dude's been freaking murked over and over again. The Uriah Hall and Douglas Lima fight, like that's an acceptable fight that, you know, should you scoff at it? Probably. The stage of the game, it's going to be in May 2025. But like athletic commission wise, like, okay, that's a cool fight. Like that's an acceptable fight to make. But Gus versus OSP, Alexander Gustafsson versus OSP, Oven St. Preux, like that's one where I'm like, so there's the GFL. I would love someone, if you're smarter than me, find the betting line of, does a GFL fight ever happen? Like, will we hear? Will a cage door close and will we hear fight in the GFL? I don't think so, but maybe. That wraps up the middle segment of the show. Final segment of the show, and with the new, we're going to talk about UFC at the Apex again. What is it? UFC on ESPN 65, UFC at the Apex, whatever. I don't think we're going to get too many more of these UFCs on ESPN, by the way. Shit might be UFC on Prime or fucking. I'd like for it to go to Prime or like Max or Netflix, something that has like a good streaming service that can actually like handle it. It's headlined by Josh Emmett taking on Lerone Murphy. We're going to talk about two fights on this card because this card is not great, boys. We're stuck on a slog. The featured bout is Cortavius Romeus versus Chang Ho Lee. Cortavius is not good. Like, neither one of these dudes is really good. That's the third fight from the top. That's the featured fight, or that's where they normally have a featured fight. I don't even think the UFC has the balls to call this a featured fight. We're going to talk about the co-main event. We're going to talk about Pat Sabatini taking on Joanderson, Brito. The odds on this fight, Joanderson is a minus 180 favorite. Pat Sabatini is coming back as a plus 150 dog. And this is a pretty interesting fight. I would say whoever wins this could be a fight away from the top 15, or could be, you know, maybe there already if they do it in real dominant fashion. Pat Sabatini's last time out, he looked really good taking on Jonathan Pierce. Prior to that, he did get knocked out and folded by Diego Lopez. I mean, it's Diego Lopez. That's what he does to dudes. That was back in 2003. So he took like almost a whole year off in between his last two fights. Before that, he beat Lucas Almeida, who just isn't that great. He did get knocked out by Damon Jackson. He, you know, beat TJ Laramie, who is not UFC level, beat Tucker Lutz, who's another dude that's just not UFC level. Tristan Connolly, another dude that's really not UFC level. So he doesn't really have any, like, you know, I would say Jonathan Pierce is his best win kind of by far in the UFC. And he's not like I don't know. I don't really rate Jonathan Pierce extremely highly. And then, you know, when he's fought UFC level and title contention level, whether you believe he deserves it or not, he loses. And he can kind of get ran over. Like, he's a dude that if like he could get wrecked in the first round, and that's, you know, what happens to him. Joanderson Brito, on the other hand, he is a dude that is actually coming off of a loss, a split decision loss to William Gomes. In a fight that I think he won, but he still didn't think he like really leaned on his best assets which is like his pure athleticism. Joanderson Brito is like maybe one of the most just like physical athletes at 145. Like, he's right there along the lines of dudes like Gene Silva and Ilia Topuria and Josh Emmett. Just like dudes that are just like super athletes. And Joanderson Brito is totally a super athlete. You know, Jack Shore not only lost, but he like left MMA forever after his fight there. He defeated Jonathan Pierce in probably his like most famous moment where Jonathan Pierce is like, he's cheating, and he just goes bah 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 and like squeezes his head off. And Jonathan Pierce was like talking to him in this like very like southern accent way that had this like trying to watch what I say, but like he was speaking to him in a way that had like racial undertones, if I could say that. The way that Jonathan Pierce was kind of like speaking to Brito in fight, it just seemed weird. Like he called him boy. And then he got his head absolutely squeezed off after that. So that was funny. Like he's like kind of got what he deserved. So they both have wins over Jonathan Pierce. He knocked out Weston Wilson. Everyone does that. And he knocked out Andre Feely. He looked really good. He beat Diego Lopez. That's another common opponent. He beat him on the Contender Series. He beat Jose Mariscal. Like that's another Chepe Mariscal. Like that's a good win. Pat Sabatini can definitely have the wrestling and grappling advantage here if he can get through the first round of this fight. If Brito goes out there and is just like, I'm going to go fuck this dude up and be the athletic dude and just go run him over with like offense and power and athleticism, like Joanderson Brito is definitely more of an athlete than Damon Jackson, and I put him on the same level, if not even more of like an athletic freak than Diego Lopez. And Diego Lopez himself is an athletic freak. Give me Joanderson Brito to win by first round stoppage. I think he's just going to go out there and just throw like a hailstorm of offense on Pat Sabatini, and Pat Sabatini is just kind of going to be too brittle to take it all. Moving on to the main event, we have Josh Emmett taking on Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy is getting a main event opportunity here against a dude that's fought for the title, and everyone knows who Josh Emmett is. Odds on this fight. Lerone Murphy's a pretty hefty favorite. He's a minus 298, minus 300 favorite. Josh Emmett's coming back at plus 240. The full 40-year-old Californian, alpha male guy, been an alpha male forever. One of the better fighters that's come out of that gym, period. Josh Emmett's a really cool fighter. He's coming off of that fucking deadening of Bryce Mitchell. Some say he's the reason why Bryce Mitchell is acting the way he's acted lately. I don't know. Ask Bryce. He hit Bryce really hard and like absolutely like Bryce Mitchell might have been the first person that was like closest to death in the octagon, maybe besides the dude that like, or the chick that Shi Ming kicked last year or earlier this year in Macau. Ilia Topuria did not knock out Josh Emmett. And like, yeah, Ilia Topuria won a 10-7 round in that fight, but like Josh Emmett in the featherweight division, no one has had more success against Ilia Topuria than Josh Emmett. That's a real thing. I sounded like fucking Chael Sonnen. That's a real thing, guys. He lost to Yair Rodriguez in an interim title fight. Before that, he beat Calvin Kattar, beat Dan Ige, beat Shane Burgos, knocked out Mirsad Bektic, fucking killed Michael Johnson. Like, the damage that he took from Jeremy Stevens too, like to be 40 years old in this division, still fighting fights like this is awesome for Josh Emmett. Lerone Murphy, his nickname is the Iceman. He's 15 wins, 0 losses. He's undefeated. He's coming off of a win over Dan Ige. Before that, he beat Edson Barbosa. Before that, he beat Josh Cooleybow. Splitty over Gabriel Santos. Knocked out Makwan Americani and knocked out Ricardo Ramos. That was a really cool finish there. Lerone Murphy is a guy that reads. I feel like I don't know. I'm not like sold on Lerone Murphy as an undefeated guy. Like, yeah, he's undefeated, but I'm not like, I don't know. Like, if you told me he was fighting Yair Rodriguez, I wouldn't feel good about picking him in that fight. Um, like, I'm not looking at him like some next title challenger. If you told me he had to fight Max Holloway at 145, I'd be like, there's another dude that Max Holloway's beating. And I know it's Max Holloway, obviously one of the greatest fighters to ever do it, but I don't see him for a dude that's undefeated 15-0. Like when Ilia Topuria was having a similar record and surging through the division, I was like, oh fuck. When Ilia Topuria, like a year before he fought Volk, when Volk was still the champion, I have a very good friend of mine that I used to do a podcast with, and I texted him and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be the dude that not only beats Volk but knocks him out. And then like a year later, I'm texting him like, dude, told you. He's like, damn it, you were right. And he also did the same thing to Max Holloway. No one's ever knocked out Max. This is not the way I look at Lerone Murphy is not the way I was looking at Ilia Topuria. It's just very different, I think. Lerone Murphy has got good power. He's just a good all-around MMA fighter. He comes from a good camp. He trains out of the UK. He can be a good wrestler when he needs to be. He has good striking, but I don't want to call him. I just don't find him like I don't find him as a potent fighter. Like Josh Emmett to me is a potent fighter. He's got not only is Josh Emmett like a skillful boxer that's like really, really tough, he never gives up on himself. He's going to go out on his shield all the time. We've never seen Lerone Murphy put in that situation before where he's had to be like willing to go out on his shield. Like he had Ilia Topuria wrestling in the 5th round. And like even his fight against like Dan Ige. Dan Ige is a person that is good to get you ready for someone like Josh Emmett, but like Josh Emmett is just kind of like Dan Ige, but hits even harder. Yeah, he's older, but like Josh Emmett is probably the scariest puncher in this division, pound for pound, one of the hardest punchers in the UFC. Now that Topuria is gone, it's like him and Gene Silva are like the two scary punchers to me in this division. He also just has close fights with dudes. And if this looks like anything like that Ilia Topuria fight from Josh Emmett, like he's got what it takes to beat Lerone Murphy in just a fucking dogfight. Like Josh Emmett himself, you know, has pretty good wrestling. He comes from alpha male, so you know he's going to have a good scrambling and a good get up game. He may give up takedowns, but he's got a good scramble game. I just hate that Josh Emmett's 40. Because like if this was the Josh Emmett that fought, if this was like in 2024, like I don't know, if this was the beginning of 2024, like after his loss to Ilia Topuria and he hadn't fought Bryce Mitchell, I'd probably like be like, oh yeah, slam Josh Emmett, and he probably wouldn't be like such a big underdog. Or if he just like if this fight was jammed in between the Yair Rodriguez and Ilia Topuria fight, I would be like, yeah, all over Josh Emmett. But just the age is what's concerning and the damage he's taken. I'm going to be totally wrong on this and look so stupid, but I think Josh Emmett's going to beat Lerone Murphy. Josh Emmett went 5 rounds with Ilia Topuria not very long ago. He is 40. He's very, very durable. He hits very, very hard. I just don't. Lerone Murphy isn't some defensive savant. And if he's stuck in a 5-round striking match against Josh Emmett, like I don't know what his cardio looks like with 5 rounds. We know Josh Emmett can fight 5 rounds. We know his power carries. Like we've seen him absolutely bite on his gum shield and go for it in the 5th rounds of fights where he's been down on the cards. We've seen him literally go out on his shield, rock Yair Rodriguez, and then get trapped into a triangle. Like if you don't kill Josh Emmett, he will try to continuously kill you. He will rely on his power. God dang it, I've convinced myself to pick Josh Emmett. Give me Josh Emmett to actually be the first person to like beat Lerone Murphy, but also like hurt him real bad in this fight. Maybe he doesn't knock him out, but like he hits him with something that is just like fight changing in the 2nd or 3rd round and just like banks the fight. Give me the old dog, and I'm going to look so stupid next week. I'm going out of town, so I might not even record a show next week. So maybe I don't have to eat crow. Who knows? That's the show, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the fight.